Memento. All right. Welcome, fellow Spellbreakers, to another edition of the Spellbreakers podcast. We have a fantastic guest returning to the Spellbreakers podcast. Many of you may not know that when I had zero fans, this man, Adam Green, generously attended my did my first podcast. And so I got to thank this guy tremendously. First, just want to give a very quick shout out to our sponsor here, macelifecatalyst.com, for people who may be dealing with trauma or energetic blockages. Mace is a method of being able to release trauma without having to disclose what you personally have gone through. I've used it. It's really good. I know Eric personally. He's a really great guy. He's honored, basically gave an offer that if he doesn't help you release your traumas and such, he won't charge you. And so far, I think 10, 12 people have used him, and I've gotten glowing reviews. So check him out, and he helps support the channel. But without further ado, a man who needs no introduction, but we shall give one out of respect, the great, the infamous Adam Green of nomorenews.org. He is definitely a spell breaker. He's been breaking a lot of spells around, I guess you would say, the judeo-christian matrix, if you will. But I want to hear in his own words. But yeah, Adam, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing? What's new since we last talked?
Well, when did we last talk? How long ago was that? I didn't realize I was the first guest you had, but I guess that's quite an honor.
Yeah, and you know, for all your, I got a lot of haters, your haters hating on me. But for all of you haters of Adam Green, the dude came on my podcast when I had zero fans, and Adam, I got spoiled because I got all your people watching my stream. So I'm like, oh, you just get hundreds and hundreds of live viewers every time you stream, and then it took years to like actually build an audience. So anyways, yeah, I think it's honestly we're close to a year now since our last one. So yeah, what's been new with you, man?
Well, Trump just got elected, like I thought he would, and in the way that I thought he would. And now we just have to see how Zionists, now the day-to-day watching Trump, we're just going to have to see how Zionist it's going to be, what he's going to do with the war in Gaza, Ukraine, with the border, who he's going to appoint. And we're going to see if the World War III breaks out, like they have the rabbis and the Christian Zionists think the role he's supposed to play.
Right. Yeah. And I want to get into all of that. I promised one of your biggest fans, Seath, to get into that, Gog, Magog, all that. But for those of you who don't know Adam, or Adam, for those of my fans who aren't familiar with your work, how would you sum up what you do as a researcher? Like, how would you kind of summarize your work?
Well, at No More News, I cover like religion, news, and politics. So I do daily news streams with current events. I do deep dives analyzing rabbi videos or just analyzing scripture. I do interviews with people, interviewing other people, debates, compilations, rabbi edit compilations, mini documentaries. So, and obviously, if we're talking about religion and American politics, it's Judaism and Christianity and Islam, the three Abrahamic religions, is the main ones we focus on. So that prophecy, end times, religion, Zionist control, those are the main topics.
Okay, got
it. And Jesus mythicism, exposing Jesus as a myth too.
Right. Nice. And what led you into this field of research? Like, were you? I know we talked about it a bit before, but yeah, you were an ex-Christian, right? And I guess what led you to basically focusing your life's work on these topics? Like, for you, is this kind of the final boss, the final spells that people need to wake up to, or to just kind of work out that way, or?
Yeah, it's the religion that dominates humanity, and it's a Jewish religion, and it's the Jewish God, the God of Israel, the God of the Torah. And I was raised Christian, but I never really identified as a Christian. I never believed it. And as soon as my parents stopped making me go, I stopped going, like when I was like 15 or 16. And then I was all about learning. I was raised Christian, but I realized it was culty, the drinking of the grape juice, the blood, the drinking of the blood, the dipping of the water, the praying, all the singing. So I didn't really believe it. The idea that the Son of God had to die to save me from my sins because of Adam and Eve, I thought it was nonsense from day one. I'd hear about the flood and these mythical stories in the Torah when they were reading them to me in Sunday school, or my mom was reading me to me, and I'm just like, these sound like made up stories, like all the rest of the movies and stories I've been looking at. So then how did I get into this? It started by, I was a teenager. YouTube came up. I'm watching atheist videos, evolution videos to like deconvert myself from my Christian upbringing. And then I discovered Alex Jones and kind of political conspiracies and New World Order, and then quickly learned that, the Zionism and the Jews are like at the core of all of those type of topics. And then, they just kind of converged.
Got it. Yeah.
Were you Christian, or are you Christian? Were you raised Christian?
I was raised Christian. I was raised by a pastor. I don't identify as Christian now. I'd say I try to live a like ethically Christian life. Like I believe in a lot of the teachings of Jesus. My wife's Christian. I believe in more like traditional living as opposed to like the, feminist, like to me, I think Christianity like ethically gets a lot of things right. I think it like psychologically gets a lot of things right. That's why it stayed. But yeah, I want to get into that. What about you? Do you identify as atheist? I know you kind of joke around with like being a Norse pagan guy. What's where are you coming in at?
Well, I don't believe any of the myths of Norse paganism, but that is my ethnic background. So, paying homage to it, especially in spite of the rabbis who like want to conquer paganism and have us all worshiping their God and believing, in the God that chose them. So that's kind of what that's about. But I'm agnostic. I'm kind of agnostic atheist. I don't rule out the possibility of, some higher power that we can't understand, but definitely don't believe in the God of the Bible, and Jews trying to claim that they can speak for God and are the prophets of God and are the chosen people of God. Forget about that. No,
Right.
no, don't even believe in that the slightest little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because like I actually have, I would say, very similar view on Christianity. Like I see Christianity as the kind of progenitor of our Western heritage, right? I'm Canadian, but European heritage. I would say it's Christianity as a foundation has made like the West probably the better place in the world to be. Yes, it's collapsing now, kind of free fall. I think you would argue controlled demolition, but that's how I see Christians. Like I see it kind of the foundation of our society, and I see a lot of goodness in the Christian message, but as well, like I follow you quite a bit. So how do you feel about Christianity in general? Maybe we can start there. Like, do you think people would ultimately be better if Christianity was like wiped off the face of the earth?
I think it would be a net positive if all the Abrahamic religions, nobody believed them anymore. I do. And it's undoubtedly Christianity played a role in shaping Western civilization, but it was also Greeks and Romans before that, and it was also other things. And but it did play a role, but then yes, also some of it's backfired. And how good of a role? How much better could the West and Europe have been if Christianity didn't take hold? Also, that's a question we could maybe never answer. But we assume like, oh, we're so great because of Christianity. Is what you hear Christians say, like, oh, our architecture and our civilization and defending ourselves from invasions and all of these things. Didn't but like take hold. Also, could have been way better if Christianity never took over with Constantine in Rome. We wouldn't be where we're at today. That's for sure. It'd be a very different timeline if the Jewish religion of Christianity, Messianic Judaism for the Gentiles, didn't take over. Could be a good movie, maybe, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping.
The world where Christianity never won out.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, and I know a lot of people, like, we interview a lot of Gnostics and stuff on here, and, I think there's a similar sentiment as well, But yeah, maybe first, so we could dive in deeper, if we could like paint the picture as you see it, right? So, okay, we have the judeo-christian religions, even that's kind of we can get into that being a spell in itself, judeo-christian. But like, would you say that is the pinnacle of evil in the world, the pinnacle of control? Like, do you see it as like the smoke screen? Like when you look at the world, do you see it's basically mostly controlled by the judeo-christian agenda? Like, do you think there's just competing like wars in the world? Like, where's your headspace at when you look at the world? Like, do you see Jews as the Jews and Christians as like the number one problem that we face? Please, like, walk us through.
Yeah, one of the main problems, definitely, and is the Judeo-Christian term. Like, you'll hear Christian, so-called anti-Zionist Christians online will say, "Oh, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian values, and we have nothing to do with each other. We're opposed to each other." And they want to split hairs and play semantics. Like, there's no question Christianity emerged out of Judaism. If you define the term like that, like Christianity came from Judaism, so it's a Judeo-Christian religion. You can't deny that. Do they have the same exact values today and same exact beliefs today? Obviously not, but I don't think that's what the term entails. It's just but it is a term that's been promoted a lot, in the last 100 years or so, to get the Jews and the Christians allied with each other. And definitely the Abrahamic religions, the two major religions in the world, Christianity and Islam, is over half the world, estimated 4.4 billion people. And they all believe in the prophecy deception, in the God of the Torah, the God of Abraham, and its prophecies, which have led us to like the brink of World War III. Trump, even at the end of his Joe Rogan interview the other day, he goes, Joe, the prophets say that the world will end in the Middle East. Like, having the leader of the free world, the president of America, being influenced by prophecies and these Christians and Muslims telling him he's the Messiah and he's going to help fulfill God's plan, and he was saved by God to save the world and save Israel. Obviously, it's front and center in our politics and our culture, and it is the biggest brainwashing, mind control operation of the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, I know. I definitely see where you're coming from. And yeah, there seems to be like a feedback loop, right? And I'd be curious to get your opinion on this. So, Christians would say that, the world in the Middle East is a sign of the truth of their religion, right? Is the sign that they were right, and Jews as well, right? They see the conflict brewing in the Middle East as, signs of the end times, of the Messiah to come. But you are saying that, hey, it's because you guys believe this that either intentionally or maybe even subconsciously, like, they're bringing to fruition those prophecies. Is that kind of your position?
Absolutely. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Christianity in itself is faked prophecy. They invented Jesus by reading scripture closely and reading him out of the scripture, and like mystical ascension, Kabbalistic like experiences that they purported to have. So like all of the New Testament, did a figure, Jesus, a Jewish comic book superhero, really walk the earth and fulfill hundreds of all these prophecies? Or did an ancient Israelite, an ancient Hebrew, just know all the prophecies and write a story where all these things are fulfilled? And then Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, took this religion and conquered Rome with it. And as soon as Rome adopted it, they outlawed pagan religions and imposed and spread the Torah messianism, Yahweh, the God of Israel, and Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the King of the Jews, as it says in the New Testament, over half the world to be the number one religion today.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I've seen several of your presentations, which I recommend everybody check out. You've done a lot of phenomenal work over the years. I've seen you interview other scholars where they argue that Jesus was almost a creation of the Jews, like a political scheme to actually kind of like guerrilla warfare to bring down Rome as minorities in the Roman system. So it was actually
Theological warfare. That's how I describe it, as like spiritual warfare, theological warfare. The pen is mightier than the sword. The ancient Judeans were occupied by the Greeks, and then they were occupied by the Romans, and they had the chances of them winning on the battlefield against Rome's empire's military was like slim to none. So they invented a solution, was a spiritual Messiah that had a spiritual victory over Satan and the Romans. And the whole point of the Messiah in the Torah and the prophecies is to conquer all the nations, have all the nations bend down and worship him and abandon their idols. And that's exactly what Christianity did. The rabbis brag about it today. And yeah, they've fulfilled their prophecies where they've got America, who they view as Edom, like on the verge of World War III with Iran, Russia, and China, which they view as Gog in the Gog and Magog war.
right. Right. And I definitely want to get into that. But maybe first we could kind of dive a bit more into Judaism, because obviously you do focus a lot on Christianity, but I think the core of a lot of your work and a lot of the exposés that you've done is Judaism, which obviously Christianity comes from the root of Judaism. But maybe you can paint a picture for that. And I want to get into what I call the great noticing, because when I last talked, your content was still very fringe and not quite in the mainstream, whereas now I think it's just exploded. So,
was it before October 7th? Because that's kind of really where it really, and Elon buying Twitter too, that's when it really started to explode also.
Yeah.
But you could even go back, 2 decades, even when the internet started is when this stuff really started to take off also.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the great noticing, I think the great noticing is a psyop, and most of this noticing is by controlled opposition, Christianity, and Islam, that's turning the Jews into the victims and hating them for stupid theological reasons. Christianity's controlled opposition. It opposes the Jews, but for the wrong reasons. It doesn't oppose the Jews because they think they're chosen by God and they want to have a Messiah that rules the world according to the prophecies, because the Christians agree with all that.
Yeah.
And their only problem is that the Jews don't accept Jesus, who was the Messiah that was meant to conquer us to begin with. So it's for the wrong reasons, and it's discrediting, and that's why I think the great noticing is part of the trap. It's like it's the pretext built up, setting us up for the rug pull.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I really want to dive into that as well. But like generally speaking, what is your thesis about Judaism? Is it that are they overrepresented? Is it the fact that like the general narrative now is to this something in effect like they're in all the positions of power, like all of the scams and schemes and wars are either directly or indirectly related to that Israel is basically using United States as a puppet, that the Jews like control the world and banking and all of this stuff. Would you say that is your main thesis or position or conclusions from the literature? Like, what do you think is actually going on with Judaism and the Jews in general? Like, yeah.
Well, all of Judaism and Jews and the Jewish identity, in my opinion, is all based on the Torah and the fake history from the Torah, the foundational myth, which they invented based on Plato's Noble Lie, around the time when they created the Septuagint in Alexandria, Greece, like 275 BC. And no, I don't say that they own every single thing or they're the only ones behind any of the evil in the world, or that all of them are bad and part of some conspiracy. Not at all. They're definitely overrepresented in a lot of influential positions, and they definitely have a lot of power and influence. But the biggest way that they have influence over the world is by getting half the world to believe that they were ever chosen and to worship their God and to be waiting for a Messiah to return. In the Talmud, it says that the creation will last for 6,000 years, and the final 2,000 years are the time of Messiah. And this has been the 2,000 years the Christians are waiting for the so-called return of a Messiah. So Christians are chanting Christ is King and waiting for the second coming of Jesus. Muslims believe in Jesus as a messianic figure, not as God, but as a prophet and a messianic figure that's going to return to defeat the Antichrist. And of course, the rabbis chant, we want Moshiach now, because they're waiting for their Moshiach to come. And they're all waiting for this messianic figure. So the real conspiracy is, like, people talk about a Jewish conspiracy, the JQ, the conspiracy. What is it? And in my opinion, it's Yahweh, Torah, prophecies of the Messiah to conquer the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's at the root of all of it.
Okay. Yeah, it's I think in many ways you've illuminated that it is a very much insular and supremacist ideology. I mean, you could argue all religions have a form of supremacy to them. That's kind of the appeal of religion, is to think that you're holier than thou or you have a special connection. But you go into
The old hold on, the old polytheistic religions didn't. They could tolerate other gods, but in a monotheistic framework. And when you go like, well, Christianity is supremacist and wants to have hegemony over the world, and so does Islam, wants everybody to Islam. But those are the spin-offs of Judaism. So
oh, lost you there. We're back. Can you hear me?
yeah, I'm back.
Okay, cool. Yeah, please continue.
The messianic meme is at the core of Christianity and Islam. And yeah, Christianity and Islam do want their Messiah and their religion to dominate the world, but they're just spin-offs and manifestations of Judaism. They're just different versions of Judaism. So neither of them are actually opposed to Judaism. They're not fighting against Judaism. They're just fighting for their own specific version of Judaism, really, is the way I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, that's interesting to think. Like, I think anytime, like, especially as you said, when you have a monotheistic religion, right? And especially if you start reading Yahweh in the Old Testament, right? It's like, there shall be no other gods, right? It's a very
the jealous
warlike,
God.
Yeah, it's like a gang mentality. It's like we're top G on the block here. And so there is that kind of supremacy there. As well, though, I think there's a lot of things about Judaism that people don't really know, like your average person, right? Like Jews typically are in North America pretty atheistic, pretty progressive, right? You saw in the last election 80% vote Democrat, but even still, a lot of them seem to have this still like tie to Israel, support of Israel. But yeah, in general, like, what would you say some of the aspects of Judaism that is not extreme but a more mainline position held by Jews in even America that a lot of people don't know about, that's shocking? Like, one for me was just the circumcisions in North America and stuff. Like, I thought that was totally shocking that that's like a common practice. That's caused problems with babies. But yeah, I mean, and then you go into the Talmud as well. You've done some exposés. Like, some of the stuff in there is horrendous. I don't know if Jews really believe that. Like, in the Bible as well, there's a lot of horrendous stuff. But yeah, there's some things that stand out to you as like really troubling aspects of Judaism that are still embraced by a dominant percentage of Jews today.
Yeah, definitely. The core, the foundation of it, that they're chosen by God and that they have a special role, and they go, oh, it's humbling, and it doesn't mean we're supremacists. Our goal is to have all of the world worship the God that chose us, and we have a special role as Noahides, basically. That entails being a Noahide entails worshiping their God, and then when you're worshiping their God that chose them, written about by their ancestors, you're basically just elevating them to be gods because they're gods made up. So right. The chosen status, the rebuilding of the temple, the having the Moshiach, like, this isn't like a fringe thing in Judaism. The idea of the Moshiach, it's the core of all of Judaism, is that their Messiah is going to come and redeem them and have vengeance on the world and punish the enemies of Israel in the end time. So as far as like the secular Jews, like the whole Jewish identity and Jewish community for the longest time like wasn't secular, and even the secular ones are still influenced through the Torah Jewish identity that's from the Torah. The victim, the chosen status, the idea of the Gentiles like hating you for no reason. So even if they don't believe it, or they don't believe it's all literal, it still, plays a role on many of them. Even Reform Judaism, I won't even get into that. Reform Judaism it's not real Judaism. It's frowned upon and, by the Orthodox and the conservatives. So we won't even go there.
Fair. But yeah, I've seen like they describe the goyim or the Gentiles as like we're closer to beasts than they are to God, and that we're lesser than, that we haven't been imbibed with, the spike of life, like, and then maybe you could get into some of that stuff that I find the most troubling.
Yeah.
And as well,
Yeah, that's not your average Jew though. Like that's Chabad Lubavitchers and top Kabbalists. They believe that non-Jewish souls emanate from the evil other side, the Sitra Achra, from the darkness, and Jews come from the light and the holy and the pure, and we're the profane and the darkness. And they believe that Gentiles are born to hate them for no reason. And the ultimate objective is to get them to leave their religions and be Noahides and worship their God in the end times. And it's not even like any of these are my opinion. We've got clips of so many rabbis outlining all of this. That's where I learned it from, straight from the rabbis' mouths, or just from reading the scripture. It just outlines this, explicitly.
Yeah, but like so, for example, most of my friends are Christian, right? And the average Christian is like, they don't even know a lot of their Bible. They believe in being good. They believe in forgiveness. Like, I think I see Christianity being of value to them in their lives, right? And in the country, that's just what I see. Most people are Christian. They're raised in families. They're good people. They help us. They're supportive, and it comes from their faith, right? Like, would you say your average Jew would be similar? Like, do they have similar tenets to Christianity? Do you think there is, like, your average Jew going to synagogue every week, there is like a difference in like supremacist, or do you think most of them really expect the empire to come? Like, yeah, what's your read?
I think a lot of them do believe. I mean, if they're sincere believers, like, they do have to believe that the Messiah is going to come and there is an end times and prophecies are real. The way I look at it is you either believe in the prophecies or you don't.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the simplest way. That boils it down to everything. You're either a believer in the Hebrew prophecies, the prophecies from the Torah of the nation of priests, or you don't. And I'm in the camp that their prophecies aren't real.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so the end time prophecies, I'd like to dive into a bit more. Like, I know we had what was it? The red heifer. We have this, persecution in the end times, that Israel will flee. Maybe you can walk through kind of high level the prophecy, the end time prophecies that they believe, what will happen kind of linearly as well. And then where do you think we are in terms of that manifest destiny?
They believe there's only like another 180 years. We're in the Jewish Hebrew year, like 5785 or 5784. So there's only like 157. There's only like 120 years before the timetable is up and their Messiah has to come, and the end time, the Sabbath millennium, the 7,000th year comes. But to boil down the prophecies, it's that there's going to be an end times war. There's the birth pangs of the Moshiach. So wars, famines, plagues, chaos on the earth, and that the East and the West will clash and wage war, mutually destroy each other. Edom, Western civilization, America and Europe will fall and collapse, and then Israel will rise up and be like the center of the world and have a one world religion, one world government. And there won't be any anti-Semites left on earth, only people that are Noahides, that follow the 7 Noahide laws and worship their God and like honor them as God's chosen people. That's not what I'm saying is inevitably going to happen. I'm saying, though, that is what the general consensus of the plan, the script, the Torah prophetic blueprint is.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And yeah, this red heifer, I was following this story for a while. It seems like they ended up not doing the ritual, but maybe you can walk people through.
They were waiting for Trump to get in. I think they're waiting for Trump to get in.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so that transitions really nicely into, I've seen a lot of your content around Trump. They're kind of promoting Trump to be the Messiah in a way, and so maybe you could walk us through that. So what is their belief about? So you've kind of already outlined it, but yeah, like they believe the tribulation, the times. I believe they believe they're going to be cast from the land, right? From Israel, they're going to be banished.
They believe all the nations are going to come and turn on them and blame them for the end times war, but then that's when everyone will know that God is with them, because God destroys all their enemies. But
Okay.
yeah, they do believe in the end time, like all the nations come and turn against him.
Right. Okay, and then so yeah, the Messiah, isn't there? They have to rebuild the temple, and they were messing around with the temple in Palestine, right? And then they think there's going to be he's an antichrist, but we're going to think he's the Messiah, and then it's going to be the true one. There's a lot of weird stuff. Maybe you could walk us through that, and how do you think that plays with Trump?
Sure. That they have the red heifers
Yeah.
that they have to burn and then mix with some water, burn to ashes, and then mix that with water so they can purify the priests and purify the land to rebuild the temple. And then, like, the crucial elements to the end times is Edom has to fall, so Western civilization has to fall, and then rebuild the temple, have the end times war, and then anoint their Messiah, and then that's basically the Sabbath millennium.
Right.
And it's Christianity. Most Christians believe that Jesus won't ever return until the Antichrist reigns in the temple in Jerusalem and calls himself God. So Christians need Jews to fulfill their prophecies in order for Christian prophecies to unfold. So some Christians like John Hagee and Pastor Greg Locke and others are actively helping with the red heifers and helping Israel rebuild the temple and giving them all this support with this, like, ulterior motive that they have to do that just so Jesus comes. But it's not coincidental that Christian end times prophecy entails Jewish prophecy being fulfilled first. So Christians believe that they have to have the mark of the beast. They have to have their Antichrist. They have to have their temple. They have to be ruling the world and, have these wars. And that's all. But they're against it. The ones that Christians that pretend like they're against it, but they're really for it because they think it has to happen. It's God's plan. It has to happen for Jesus to come back. So unless they don't want Jesus to return, they have to accept and capitulate the Hebrew prophecies coming about.
Yeah. And I think for me, that's my biggest critique of Christianity, and I think you've really inspired that kind of position for myself. That, like, a lot of our friends who are Christians, I think they have a lot of chinks in the armor. The main one being Israel, right? Because basically, to me, I just think, Israel, it was a marketing campaign. They're like, let's just call it, the same country as the Bible. And then now so many Christians still to this day just accept that this is the Israel of the Bible. And so, you see
but
that
that's
all.
what they're not just trying to trick the Christians. That's what they think it is. The whole purpose of returning to the land was to go back and then fulfill their prophecy and rebuild the temple. So it's not like they're just trying to trick Christians and pretending to be Israel. They really do think they are Israel and they're fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah.
So
No, for sure. Thank you for that clarification. Just for me, I just think it's silly, because, like, you're reading the Bible in Bible study, and then you're seeing a country that's like 70 years old, and they're like, oh, this is that. I'm like, just because they called it Israel doesn't mean it is. Like, that's my position. I'm not saying that's their position.
But it's in the same place, right?
Yeah.
Maybe don't call it Jerusalem. Is Jerusalem still Jerusalem? Was it ever not Jerusalem?
That's a good question. Yeah. I know what I see both.
Well, this is the reason I'm pushing back on that. It's because a lot of Christians go, their conspiracy is they're the fake Jews and they're the Khazarians and they're the synagogue of Satan. They say they're Jews, but they're not. They're fake Jews, right? That's the talking point. They're not the real Israel. It's not the biblical Israel. They're secular atheists that created. And it's like they're all saying all this kosher conspiracies that's not actually addressing what the actual conspiracy is. The Torah plan to return to the land, to rebuild the temple, and have their Messiah theologically subdue and have dominion over, like it says in Daniel 7, have dominion over all the world. So that's the actual conspiracy, not that it's like you'll hear Stu Peters say, "Oh, it's the secular fake state of Israel." Like what if they were like real Jews and it would be the real state of Israel? So I see it a little differently than a lot of the quote unquote noticers.
Yeah. And I think you make a really good point there that they really believe what they're saying, right? Then that's important. And for me, I'm not sure, especially in the Bush-Cheney era, it felt like there were quotes about them trying to, like, usher in revelation. You know what I mean? And you still see this this compromising, like, factor in U.S. politics. The dual citizens, all of this, right? And I wonder to what degree is it just because they've compromised them through, like, Epstein stuff, blackmail, or is it just like these guys actually believe it as well, so they're allowing this to happen? What do you think?
It's a
What do you think?
combination, and it's on a spectrum. Like they just what happens is because Christianity and evangelical Christian Zionism is the number one religion in the country, like those voters elect a lot of Christian Zionist politicians, especially when they're backed by Zionist lobbies and Zionist donors, right? They're elevating sincere believers that sincerely believe that they're cursed if they curse Israel and blessed if they bless them, and a foreign land is the holy land, and the foreign people are God's chosen people. So
Okay.
Online with a lot of these noticers, they'll say, "Oh, it's AIPAC. Oh, that politician said that because of AIPAC or because they're blackmailed by Epstein." That can be the case with some of them, but it's much easier for them just elevate people that are already sincere believers through the mind control of Christianity.
Interesting.
Like, what is the biggest reason that Israel has so much power over America? If you only had to name one thing, how could it not be Christianity?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to me, I just always assume blackmail, but your clips especially, like, in Canada, there's a lot less of a like rah Israel than in America. It's still there in the Christian churches, but it's not as pronounced as
but way more than blackmail, it's people just selling out and being bought off and being frontmen and sellouts, right? There's sincere believers, and then sure, some of them could be blackmailed. But the blackmailing would probably be people that elevated to power that like weren't initially with them, Mm-hmm. So it's some of all three. I'm not saying blackmail doesn't exist. It definitely does. But I think that the sincere Christian believers in positions of power in America far outweighs any blackmail type of people. But Trump, I don't think Trump's a sincere Christian at all.
No.
And it's far more likely he's blackmailed and he's controlled than a sincere believer. Mm-hmm. So he's the exception to that rule for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just the I know you said it's not all AIPAC, but the AIPAC and Israeli lobby, I think they said they were next to pharma, like number one. Like they almost had one lobbyist per congressman or something.
Well, it's not even just AIPAC either, right? Thomas Massey had the Tucker Carlson interview and said everybody in Congress has an AIPAC handler. Yeah. But like Trump's not even closest with AIPAC. He's getting awards and going and speaking and being praised by all these other groups like the Adelson Israel American Council, I think the IAC and the Israel Heritage Foundation, the Zionist Organization of America, and several other big ones. Like, so it's certainly not just AIPAC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good distinction.
Yeah, Kufi too, right? Jack Stone, Kufi's another big one.
Yeah,
Christians United for Israel.
Yeah. And
which John Hagee, the Christian Zionist, hardcore Christian Zionist and Israel supporter, like he's America's pastor basically. He has more high-level political connections and influence than anybody else really. That's why I call him America's pastor. From Pompeo to Ted Cruz to DeSantis to Trump, Nikki Haley. Okay. I'm forgetting one of the biggest ones too. Who's the Speaker of the House? Mike Johnson, another John Hagee guy. So
yeah.
Christians that are like, we want Christian nationalism and we need to make America Christian again. Like that'll save us from the Zionists. It's like they're saying more of the problem is the solution. Or when they're saying, we're like the Christians say they're opposed to the Jews and they're keeping the Jews in check, right? That's what they say. You're not going to defeat Messianic Judaism with more Messianic Judaism.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that a little bit. So, like, one aspect of the noticing, right, is just exposing to what degree. So your work, you do a lot to expose, let's say, the Rebbe and all of these high-ranking rabbis who openly brag about all this stuff, right? Using America as a puppet, that we control the strings, that yada yada yada. Basically, they're like the anti-Semitic tropes they every day like brag about almost, right? I find that fascinating. But then I'd say the noticing is not just that, but it's also exposing like the secular Jews that call them the lefty Jews who are promoting, and everywhere from Vox to all of these places, they're promoting, sexual deviancy and, trans and pan stuff, and a lot of the stuff that Christians, I think, actually are the top defenders of, right? Like there's a lot of like anti-family agenda, like, you know, do drugs, sleep with tons of people, like kind of social demoralizing behaviors that the noticers are pointing out. I see Christians as still being the large defense again. So, you know, I'd be curious.
They're the defense against, but they're also radicalizing the other side. Like, why does the left obsess so much over abortion and LGBTQ? It's because they're trying to rub it in the faces of the Christians. They're trying to, you know, they're trying to do it in spite of Christianity. And then the Christians do the same thing. They push the Handmaid's Tale memes and, you know, all of this, you know, super fundamentalist, authoritarian Christian stuff, like, to trigger the left. So the extremes on both sides, I think, work to radicalize each other.
Yeah, I definitely see that position. I guess for me, like, I personally, you know, I don't identify as Christian, but I resonate with a lot of Christianity. And as I said, a lot of my friends are Christians, right?
Yeah, as far as like the anti-woke stuff, but there can be woke Christians too. But yeah, I agree with you. When it comes to a lot of issues, I'll side with the right.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but like more so, I would say.
I get. Yeah. Yeah, and I think there also has to be credit where credit's due. Like, I mean, to me, I think the Amish are like the most based people in our society. Like, they called it 100 years ago, you know, that a lot of the society is corrupt, that you need to separate yourself from them. Like, most medical interventions are bullshit. Like, you know, to me, I think a lot of the solutions are a proto or neo Amish movements, you know, and as well,
I think
like,
they take it a little too far, but I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Yeah, and but as well, like, you know, so that's when I hear, you know, when you say I think it would be a net positive, you know, I think that's where I disagree, because I see in many people's lives Christianity is a force for good, for being more compassionate, loving, you know, family oriented, resisting evil.
Dude, do you know how much non-compassion and non-love I see from Christians every day? Christians, some of the most evil liars that I encounter, honestly. And you can be a good person and have compassion and love people without believing in, you know, magical Hebrew fairy tales. That's my view on that.
Okay,
and here's the big question for Christianity in America: would we have more Christian Zionism or less Christian Zionism if there was less Christianity in America? Like, I see it as simple as that. Obviously, Israel wouldn't have the power over America with less Christianity. And as Christianity now in younger generations is falling, and it's falling in European countries, it's growing only like in non-European, non-white countries. But so I think we'll be okay. We'll be okay without the magical stories and the go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I just don't think culturally we haven't replaced it with anything, right? Like for me, I actually deprogrammed from a Christian cult, like Seventh-day Adventist, through like there was a show called The Atheist Experience, and then it was
I used to watch that too. That was part of my deconversion.
Yeah, and I thought that
before I found Alex Jones, I was listening to Atheist Experience on iTunes.
Yeah, dude, same. Yeah,
like, and Dillahunty turned into such a woke, like, dating a trans person. That's
so
super insane lefty,
dude. Exactly, and so this is my point, right? Is Dillahunty is a perfect example. Like, the dude. Okay, he broke a lot of spells about Christian nonsense, right? But then the dude can't keep it together on his own. Like, he ended up being like poly, and his life got all fucked up, and then he got all woke, and I don't think he'd be a good, you know, example of a life to live, you know. And like, for me with Christianity, I don't think we've replaced it with something better. Like, atheists, like, oh, you come from fucking dirt and you're an accident, like, that's not inspiring to me. You know, like, it's
inspiring to me. I think that's awesome.
But I'm just saying, culturally, there's something about Christianity that gets to the root of our psychology, you know, and it sticks, you know, and I think it
has
is
stuck. That's for sure. It's not sticking as much anymore, though. It's actually rapidly in free fall.
Yeah, there's also, we can get into that as well. There seems to be this resurgence, though, and to me, if it's, I don't really like it. But you get this, like, Russell Brand and all these, like, come to Jesus celebs, you know, there does seem to be this resurgence, and Alex Jones is pretty much just like a Southern Baptist preacher now, like selling his boner pills. But you
Hmm.
know, like
Hmm.
every Alex Jones, like I think there actually is a resurgence of Christianity. I'm seeing it all over the place, and also I just think it's because of the evil wokeness and stuff. So, what do you think about
Right,
that?
that's a good point. The satanic panic and the fear mongering about demons like Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones, everything's demons, and everything bad in the world is satanic, Luciferian, child sacrificing, blood drinking, all this stuff, demons, and everything's demons and Satanists. What does that do if not just scare people to fill the pews and go to church and believe in Jesus? It's using fear to scare people into getting in line and being God-fearers. And which God are we talking about? The God of Zion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what the Satanism stuff's about.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying that we're having this feedback here. Like the more there's the wokeness on the left, the more that's
Mhm.
radicalizing right. And you could
And
argue,
I
do you
agree.
think
I
that's by
agree with you.
design or?
Statistically, Christianity is falling among in the West,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, even there's still a large percentage of it, and they're becoming even more hardcore, more
Yeah, yeah,
what's the word? Not radicalized, extreme. They're just becoming more extreme, even though their numbers are dwindling overall.
mm-hmm.
So that is true. I
Yeah,
do agree with the Russell Brands and the Alex. Basically, right wing MAGA. That's who's really. They're all using Christianity as brainwashing to keep everybody on the Judeo plantation,
mm,
either supporting Israel and being good Shabbos Goy Noahide Christians, or playing the controlled opposition that discredits and turns and plays the villain and gives them their victim, we're hated by everybody status.
yeah. Yeah, and yeah, like so let's get into this phenomenon called the noticing. In my title of the talk here, it's the great noticing. You know, it's basically everybody pointing out the fact that not just the work you've done, and a lot of people don't credit you. They take your clips and like edit out your logos. I see that shit. I think it's bullshit. But as well, you know, pointing out that a lot of what's happening is, you know, there's Israelis behind it, right? That most people, you know, the great noticing, right? Like, how would you define like what the great noticing is? And then what do you think are some of the problems with it? Because on the surface, it seems like this great awakening, but you know, yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think?
there's a noticing of APEC influence and ADL and Jewish power over politics. People are noticing that, but so much of it has being corralled into playing the antithesis to Judaism. And so like so much of this noticing online, they're not saying it's Yahweh and it's the prophecies and it's the Torah agenda. They go, no, it's the Talmud. There's nothing wrong with the Torah. It's only the Talmud, and it's not the Jewish conspiracy. It's the fake Jews, and it's the Khazarians, and it's the secret Edomites. And the Christian problem with Judaism is just that they don't believe in Jesus. Not that they want to have a Messiah to conquer all the world according to the prophecies, but that they don't believe in that Messiah that was meant to do that. Like
Yeah,
that's just limited hangout. That's not the real issue. So, and so much of the great noticing, if we want to call it that, is dominated by Christians and Muslims. It's
yeah,
just all part. They're enabling and they're playing. They're creating an echo chamber and a circle jerk where it's just different versions of different flavors of Judaism arguing over the details, essentially. But they
yeah,
all agree on the central core foundation that the prophecies are real, the God of Abraham's real, the Torah is, divinely inspired. They all
yeah.
share that. So on that level, they are controlled opposition because they're all controlled in the Abrahamic paradigm.
Yeah, no, I see your point. Like I mocked Stu Peters a few times. You know, when Trump got shot, um,
Mhm.
Stu was like, "Oh, it's definitely Mossad."
Yeah, he
I
said
was,
Mossad did it. And it's like, dude, you don't get it. You're not exposing Mossad to say Mossad tried to take out their chosen guy.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And I get a kick from Alex Jones as well. Like I'm trying not to just put
Mhm.
everyone in shill mode, but it's hard
Yeah.
not to. Like Stu Peters, you
Mhm.
know, for a lot of things you cover, and also Alex Jones as well. Like, you know, he says like Hollywood's owned by Chinese, and you
Mhm.
know, Saudi Arabia did 9/11, and like, do you think these guys are actually bought off? Do you think they're just ignorant? Do you think they like what's going on here? Like, do you think it's all by design? This is like a grand conspiracy to subvert. I don't know. Where are you coming in at with a lot of these?
They're all
people?
controlled on different levels. With Alex Jones, is it financial? Is it him trying to pander to the Christian audience? Is it blackmail? I don't exactly know, but the bottom line is he's a Torah shill. He shills. He says everything's demonic and satanic, and the solution is Jesus and the God of the Bible. So, I mean,
yeah,
he's reinforcing and keeping everybody on the Abrahamic plantation. He's in the name of fighting the satanic Luciferian New World Order. Yeah. He's ushering in the Torah Messiah prophecy New World Order.
Yeah, and a lot of people. I shared your clip there. I'm glad you sent it to me. That the whole origin of the New World Order comes from the Torah, correct? Like straight out of the Torah.
Well, the idea of a one world government and a one world religion certainly does.
Right. Yeah, I saw. Yeah, you sent me that clip about a rabbi bragging about the New World Order.
Right.
Yeah.
The Jewish New World Order compilation of a bunch of rabbis saying it's going to be the Torah. Another thing of a controlled op, they'll say they'll go Revelation 3:9, and Jesus said that the Jays were the synagogue of Satan. Like, and if that's what your criticism is, that they worship Satan, it's not even true. They worship Yahweh. If you can't identify Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Torah, as the central mythical deity at the core of the conspiracy, you're not getting it. Satan works in Judaism, Satan works for God. He's the adversary. He gives free will and the evil inclination and tests them and persecutes them. He provides an important, crucial divine role in God's plan. God creates the good and the darkness. God, this is how Satan just scares people to believe in God. He works for God in that degree. God created him. He doesn't destroy him. He allows him to operate. So, I mean, saying they worship Satan, well, who created Satan? Who allows it? Who created them? Like, it all boils down to God in the end. So it's just more kosher Christian conspiracy, limited hangouts.
Yeah, in this whole movement, like I was kind of naive to like Fuentes. I'm starting to see all these guys more and more. Just I can't even watch their stuff anymore. Fuentes, Peters, Jones. I find Jones super entertaining. Just to be clear, just like
out of all of those, like Nick, I disagree with lots of stuff, especially on religion and his past so much support for Trump, but he's still a smart guy and entertaining and can be funny, and says a lot of base stuff that I agree with. So of all the people online, like, although I'm very critical of Nick on certain things, I still think he's like, one of the best and one of the ones that I'll watch the most of all people. I can't watch many people, but he's one of them that, can keep my attention for a while.
Yeah, he's hilarious. But basically, like, I just wish there could be more of a like, you kind of fight with everybody, and I'm not saying that to beef you. I'm just saying, like,
it's true.
Like, you got haters on all fucking sides, and I wish that, like, is there a way that we could bring together, like a bigger tent of noticers, because you're fighting with the Peters, for a different reason that you beef with Fuentes, for a different reason that you're beefing with Jones, and then even Jake Shields.
Well, my problem with all of them is about the same. They all believe in magical Jewish people that have magical prophecies and want to worship the God of the Bible. So that's my problem. I have the same main problem with all three of them, with all Christians and Muslims, and even Jews. I feel like Jews, we mentioned this earlier, I think they're victims of the prophecy deception as well. Yeah, because these people, they're raised into this, they're indoctrinated from a young early age. They use fear to scare them, to keep them on the Judaism plantation as well. And it's at the very top, it's just the high priest manipulating everybody through these prophecies, through these spells, through this hypnotic, fear-based mind control system.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I don't know. I just think it's a lose. I think getting people to reject Christianity is a losing battle at this time, and I think there's a lot of Christians that are becoming
It's an uphill. Sorry to interrupt. It's an uphill battle because we're going up against
Oh.
a deeply entrenched, like 2,000-year-old cult. It's the top religion in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not the first one to say these things about Judaism and Christianity. People have known this for a long, long time,
Yeah.
and the truth is on our side. And I feel like we're only kind of like getting started, getting it out there, and we're already making a lot of headway. And
Mm-hmm.
they're threatened. They're threatened by the message for sure, and they're threatened because it's the truth, and they're losing people. And it's true. At the end of the day, Christianity is Judaism for the Gentiles. It is mythical prophecy fulfillment, and they can't deal with that. They just lie and smear and slander and continue to lie. They play the perfect theological controlled opposition because they say the dumbest things. Like they can't even admit that Jesus is a Jewish figure.
Yeah.
How do you think you're ever going to win and defeat like the Zog Empire if you can't even acknowledge that they don't want to worship a Jewish person, so they deny their religion that Jesus is Jewish.
Yeah, that's
good luck
tough.
ever winning with that.
Yeah, when I see you arguing on Twitter, I don't even care to get in there because there's no argument Jesus was a Jew. But again, back to it before, like a lot of people's whole, like, I think humans are wired for religion psychologically, right? And that's why even if you reject religion, you get wokeism, which is, if you look at it objectively, it is a form of religion, and it kind of mirrors a lot of Christianity, like original sin. Instead of it being sin, it's racism, it's sexism, right? And that you can never fully repent. Like, I just think we're wired that way, right? And so, especially now when we see a lot of, like a lot of these world leaders are evil. A lot of the politicians are like diddlers. A lot of them are doing evil shit, right? Just on that point, would you agree with that? Like, I know you're not into the satanic panic, but also it is showing more and more, the awakening is showing that, like, a lot of the people at the top are pedos. A lot of them are doing evil shit and abusing children and doing a lot of stuff. Like, do you think that's all BS, or where do you come in at that? Maybe we can start there.
Not all BS, but I don't think it's as widespread as the Q-tards like to say it is.
Okay. So you think it's
like there was
inflated.
Epstein, there's Diddy, there is child trafficking. That's undoubtedly real, but to the extent that these people hype it up as, and I don't think so. And I don't think there's like widespread like secret satanic worship everywhere. That most of what we would call Satanism is just atheists trying to trigger Christians and be edgy.
Yeah. Well, I pulled a list. It was just in Congress over the past 30 years. There's like 150 people, congressmen, who have been convicted of sex crimes, and a lot of them involving minors. And that's just...
Say that again? In how many years? 150 people?
Yeah, it's like 30 or 40. I'll send you the list. Like, you can look it up. I found it on Google, and it lists all
I know
of them.
Dennis Hastert was the one. He was the Republican Speaker of the House that was like abusing young boys when he was a wrestling coach. Who was that gay Democrat too? He had scandals. There's the Franklin cover-up with Reagan and Bush and the Republicans also. So it goes on, but I mean, I don't think it's like, the way Q people and people online, their conspiracies about it is like they're all doing these rituals and drinking baby blood and getting magical powers. Like, I think that's a whole lot of hype, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's less evidence for the rampant adreno stuff.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, I'll send you the list after. I'll find it. But like, I do think they actually use sexual blackmail as a form of control. I think it actually is an initiation into the higher echelons of power. I think Epstein was...
I agree, but that's not Satanism though. It's just blackmail.
Yeah. It might not necessarily be... Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think you make a very good point that I think they use fear unnecessarily to do that. And that's my main critique of the noticing, is that they're now like for me, any type of victim mentality and victim identity is really destructive. And that's, I think, the left has been characterized by that. But now I see it on the right, and especially in the noticing movement, where it's like, it's all the Jews' fault. The Jews are the reason why my wife left me. The Jews are the reason why, my life sucks. The Jews are the reason why we can't have nice things and my whole country is, ruined. And I think that is, to me, one of the most pernicious and bad aspects of the noticing. What do you think about that?
So could you ask the question again? Sorry, I lost the first part.
It's basically the the great noticing, right? Now everybody's basically blaming Jews for all of our
Oh,
problems.
blaming Jews for everything. Yeah, definitely. People take it too far and attribute too much power to them, I think. Like from the Christian mindset, like if they think that they have, black magic spells and that they're the children of Satan, like that's still elevating them to like a supernatural type of power. So it's kind of like demoralizing and debilitating to do that, to think that they are the synagogue of Satan, they worship Satan, they get black magic powers. Like that's kind of elevating them to some type of villain that you like can't destroy. You just have to put your faith in Jesus and hope Jesus is going to come back and save you. So I think that's kind of a demoralizing. And as far as like Owen Benjamin always talks about, like the Jews aren't making you watch the porn and buy the alcohol and take the loans and get into the debt. And that is true. But, some people take it to two extremes. Like they are, our taxes higher because of Jewish influence on America. Like, well, all the money that goes to Israel. And so, yeah, that does increase our taxes. That does, take money out of people's pocketbooks. I can't really think of any other examples off the top of my head at the moment of what are you thinking of? Like, what are you asking about? People attributing too much power to them. Alex Jones always says, "Oh, anytime something happens, anytime you slip on a banana peel, a Jew did it." Like, it is true. Like a lot of times with things, you'll see something, and then you'll just kind of know it in your gut, and you'll check the early life, and it'll turn out to be true. So there is some truth to that. But at the same time, it's like you can't blame everybody. Like, oh, a Gentile's never part of anything bad.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean,
have some nuance. Don't speak in absolutes, and that's the safe way to go. That's kind of my approach.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think personally, we're in like the fall of Rome right now. We're like late stage Rome, and so we're seeing a lot of social collapse. Right, we're seeing trust in institutions at a record low, trust in media, trust in all of these things, right? You're seeing just like deaths of despair as a high, right? And so I think there's a lot of pointing figures and blaming. So I'll take one example: mass immigration, right? So if you look into it, most of the people pushing mass immigration in America are either Catholic groups or Jewish groups, NGOs, and they actually have a lot of power, and some of them even have like
liberals too, or atheist liberals.
Yeah, but I'm just talking from a noticing perspective. There's a blame of Jews for mass immigration, which I'm sure you've heard.
Yeah,
right?
They want to blame exclusively them for that when there's tons of Catholics involved as well. But then also, like, Catholics, I just see as like Judaism. It's the universal religion. They want everybody to believe in the God of Israel. So I still consider that like an extension of the Judeo conspiracy completely.
Yeah. But for me, like, I take the stance that, like, in the West, people aren't having kids, and the fact that we're not having kids is promoting, like, from a pure numbers machine perspective. It's like we don't have enough people to serve the boomer class that's dying, and people refuse to have kids. Thus, we need to have more kids, but people blame mass immigration on the Jays, whereas I think we need to take radical ownership. Like, I'm trying to talk more solutions, right? Because a lot of our problems now, I think this noticing is exactly what you say, is a trapping to blame the Jews for all of our problems. But, I think a lot of it is because we failed as a culture generationally, and it's time for us to kind of take responsibility, So yeah, maybe we could talk a bit of, just about that generally and how you see solutions, right?
I've thought about that before, like people that say that like that we have a Jewish problem. Like, would there be a problem outside of us if we didn't have a problem within ourselves? So yeah, people do need to take more accountability. But the idea of getting into like a breeding contest and trying to outbreed, foreigners that they bring in here, and there is some truth, like the way I cover it, the prophecy angle. They have, all these rabbis celebrating mass immigration and Muslims coming into Europe and saying that's Ishmael. Ishmael is the broom that's wiping away Esau and Edom. Like, so there is motive, there is prophecy motive to have open borders in European countries that's related to the religion and the prophecies. So I do attribute to some of that, but definitely some people take it too far and only blame them as the root and only cause of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really good to make that distinction, not just to worry about offending, but I think for our own, like as especially as men, I find it so annoying when people just blame other people for their problems. Like I think now moving forward, we have to really practice radical responsibility in our own communities, our own cultures, right? Yes, calling out evil, but I just don't think anyone's there to save us, right? And so I think this grand noticing where everyone's just complaining about, whataboutism and pointing fingers, like, I'm interested in solutions, because I just think at a certain point you got to stop noticing and stop doing something. So yeah, I would be curious, just the time we have left, what do you think? Yeah, what do you think?
Didn't you just have a new kid too, by the way? You mentioned having kids. Was that you that said you?
Yeah.
How's your newborn doing?
Good, man. Yeah, week 2, so the grind. A little sleepless, but dude, it's amazing. Being a father's like so great. I'm trying to recommend everybody do it, but yeah.
Right. I can't because the Jews.
Yeah.
I can't get a wife because the Jews.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Some people will
like
say that too.
It's
They'll be like,
that.
"Oh, they've wrecked all the women. All the women are awful because of Zionist television." Like some people do just like to find a scapegoat because of their own shortcomings. But I don't do that. I don't blame Jews for like problems in my own life. I'll blame the ADL for like lying about me and getting me banned from places. Like that's rightful blame can be put around. I'll blame America being so subservient to Israel because of Christianity, like things that are true. But some people just try to blame them for absolutely everything, and I think it's discrediting.
Yeah, and that's part of the game as well, right? This like they have the Samson option as well, right? Where they're like, everyone's going to turn on us. So there seems to be wired into both Christianity and Judaism this like victim culture,
martyrdom. Yeah, Christianity says like you'll be hated by the world. The world hated me first, so they'll hate you too, and that's very similar to Judaism that thinks like everybody hates them for no reason, and that's part of their chosenness is everybody's going to hate them and be jealous.
Yeah.
So that's true.
Yeah, and so like predictions moving forward, like so I actually think a lot of the spells around Israel are breaking because if you look, most of it is actually boomers in terms of support for Israel. Like if it was just 30 and unders or 40 and unders, the support for Israel collapses. And so, as well, I just see their spell around the Middle East. I think people have already gotten their fill for the most part. Like Israel's
funny
tactics.
that you just said that, the fill. It reminds me of the verse, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. I think it's Luke. I want to say Luke 4, maybe. It could be wrong. Definitely Luke. But it says when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. So we've reached the fullness of the peak of Christian Zionism, and now Christianity is in decline in Europe. So it's like now is the time. Like they're not going to have the Christian Zionist support like they've had today and in recent past going on in the future. So it's like now is the time where, and they know this. I saw Ben Shapiro saying this the other day. There was a leaked video of Jonathan Greenblatt saying the same thing, like support among the youth is falling. So like this is the time like where they're desperate and it's make or break it time for them, which is really dangerous. And that's why I think Trump and this World War III that we're on the brink of aligning so much with Gog and Magog is not a coincidence. And as far as predictions, I'm going to give my predictions for Trump in his next term. I think he's going to first negotiate a peace deal with Putin in Ukraine, forcing Ukraine to give up their land and agree to not ever join NATO.
Yep.
And so everybody's going to hail him as he saved us from World War III. He saved us from peace.
Yep.
He's the peacemaker. He's the peace president. And then they're going to move their. In fact, I just saw an article. They're saying the West Bank Palestine peace deal is back on the table now with Trump. So he's going to talk about having peace with the West Bank and Palestine, which will then allow Israel to have normalization with Saudi Arabia. And like the Christian end times prophecy says, there has to be a covenant of the many with this peacemaker who is the Antichrist. And then after 3.5 years, something will unfold, the peace will fall apart, and then the big war will break out where the East and the West like mutually destroy each other. But overall, Edom, Western civilization, has a collapse. You mentioned we're in the. It looks like the Roman Empire collapsing again. That's because they see Edom as Rome, Western civilization as the extension of Rome. And in the Talmud, it says both nations cannot coexist at the same time. For Israel to rise up and achieve their messianic ambitions, Rome, Edom, the West has to fall.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what my predictions are, because I see how much influence and controlled opposition and religious brainwashing they have, and political over the, the machinations of power. So I see if they have their way, and if we don't put a stop to it, that's what the plan is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I agree with like Trump being compromised and an actor. I find him really entertaining, but I also do think, if he can stop wars, that's a great thing, ultimately. And also I think
he could stop a war, but think about how easily they can manipulate him into bombing Iran. Like they have they'll be like another 9/11 in America. What do you think Trump's going to do? Or Israel will keep provoking and slaughtering Palestinians. Iran's going to respond again. And then what's Trump going to do? What's Trump going to do when there's 200 missiles sent from Iran and Hezbollah to Israel? You think he's going to just shoot a few of them down and not retaliate like Biden did? Highly doubt it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see your point exactly. But I'm honestly optimistic. Like, I just see the spells weakening. Like, I think people care so little about Israel. They're largely seen as just like at this point have zero moral authority to continue what they're doing. I don't see the.
But hold on. But turning on Israel is part of the end times prophecy. The rise in anti-Semitism in Edom is part of their end times prophecy. It's called Jacob's trouble in the end times. And since all of the noticing is coming from Christians and Muslims, that's also part of the prophecy that Esau and Ishmael will team up and turn against him. So I'm not optimistic like you are.
Okay.
I think it's all going according to their script and their plan.
I don't think people want to go and die for Israel. I think there's not an appetite for another war broadly in America, and I think
wait until they attack us. Wait until there's a huge attack on America and see how fast they rally to want to go. And it's not going to be like troops on the ground. That's not the way World War III is going to fought with a bunch of troops, invading Iran. It's going to be all missiles, nukes, drones.
Yeah.
So even if the masses of soldiers don't want to go, it won't make a difference.
I see. Yeah. I final question. I want to be respectful of your time. I'm always trying to think ahead. Like, how are they going to pull off the prophecy of like the end times, and who is it going to be? And kind of 3 years ago, I said, I think it's Elon Musk or Trump, and I actually see Musk over Trump being able to fit that Messiah character, right, in the Book of Revelations, right? Mm-hmm. And then funny enough, now Elon's on the ticket, all of that, and so I'd be curious to see, like, do you think about that, and like, how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I wonder what role Elon's going to play. He just right after Trump got elected, he posted, I think it's in Latin, the new order of the ages, like the new world order phrase that's on the seal, right? And think of Elon, dude. All the power that one guy has. SpaceX, Starlink, Neuralink, robots, Tesla's self-driving cars, SpaceX with Trump's Space Force, the connections with PayPal and Peter Thiel with J.D. Vance and Elon. Elon's close friendship with Netanyahu and Ben Shapiro. And he was even in the booth at the World Cup with Jared Kushner. So if he's a front man, we're in big trouble because he's got so much power.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, just like
I think too. I didn't even mention X, like all of like the most dominant social media site online. Also him. Yeah. It's a whole lot of power for one individual to have.
I totally agree. Yeah. And I think he's going to be propped up, right? And I think, but at the same time, do you think globally there will be an appetite? Like in the Bible, it's like there's going to be a global worship around one man. Like,
look at Trump. Who's the most famous person in the world? He's the most famous and the most hated. And no political figure that I know of has ever had such a cultish, messianic aura around him as Trump does.
Obama wasn't that far away, though, if we're if we're honest.
He was close, but not,
Yeah.
a lot of his followers aren't Christians. So it wasn't
Yeah.
the Christian. He didn't have a QAnon cult that thought he's
Yeah.
saving the children from the deep state.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
the
Fair
most
point,
they
yeah.
thought about him is like, he's going to stop racism and get us out of foreign wars. Like, that's the most anybody thought of Obama. He's going to
Yeah.
give us free health care. Like, that's very different from the perception that people have of Trump.
Yeah, there was a weird I covered it on a podcast actually. They kind of positioned him like a messiah. Like they had like halos behind his head, and they would say like divine from God. Like there was weird shit around Obama. But anyway, I see your point exactly. I largely agree.
Nobody was saying that Obama's life was saved so he could save the world and comparing him to Jesus in all these ways. Not anywhere near with Trump.
Yeah, what do you make about Eargate? Do you think this was real? What do you?
Yeah, dude. The fact that I predicted it, by the way, too. Me and Donnie Darkin, we've been talking about Trump as an antichrist for like at least the last, over 4 years, even when he was back in office. But with Donnie, it was the video was 2 years ago. And we're like, well, the antichrist is supposed to have a head wound that he survives, right? So we're like, maybe all this talk of an assassination attempt on Trump, we predicted that he would survive a head wound. And exactly what happened. Everybody says he's saved by God. He's ordained by God now. And we called that. But I mean, I don't know exactly what went down, but all I know is he had a huge bandage on, and then it was off a week later, and there was nothing on his ear. So what's the big Band-Aid for if there's nothing there after the fact? He doesn't have a piece missing. He doesn't have a scar. He's an old man, too. Old man skin does not heal miraculously in 2 weeks where you can't even notice anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, and what's funny is I don't think even a lot of the conservatives truly believe it because they just stopped talking about it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even a major talking point after like 2 weeks. It's still
it was amazing how fast it was like buried. It was in and out of the news cycle.
Yeah,
but
right?
I think that was him, the assassination attempt, and him getting up and saying fight, 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 and doing his fist up. I think I knew for sure it was over and he was going to win once I saw that.
Yeah. I'm actually collecting a bet tonight because I bet it on Trump 3 years ago. I'm pretty.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I won $100 bet with my buddy Al Bashai.
Fuck yeah, yeah, man. You gotta go, right? You got a hard stop.
Yeah, I gotta run.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we'll have you on again. But yeah, man. Where can people find you? How can people support you? Please plug.
NoMoreNews.org is my website. KNOW, like knowledge. And there you can find, my Twitter, Telegram. I stream on Rumble, Odyssey, and post on BitChute. You can find all my links there. And I'm coming out with a book called The Jesus Deception pretty soon about how Jesus is a myth invented by ancient Israelites to theologically conquer Rome and the nations. That's the conspiracy in a nutshell. Thanks for having me on, Donnie. Congratulations on the newborn. And I'm glad your channel's doing well. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, man. Thanks. And thank you guys, everyone, for watching. Please support Adam. I'm going to